Okay. Thank you. Today's meeting materials are posted on the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development's Phase 2 update webpage. So, I'd like to call this meeting to order and do a roll call of task force members and designees in attendance. When I call your agency, will the task force member or designee please introduce themselves and identify anyone else present with you, as well as other individuals from your department in attendance. So please provide your full names and please have your video on when you respond. If you don't have a microphone, please then you may use the chat function to provide your name and agency. Okay, so I'll go ahead with a roll call. Ken Kakasako.
Hi, Ken Kakasako, Hawaii Department of Education. There's no one else here with me in the room.
Thank you, Ken. Summer Silva, Office of Hawaiian Affairs. We see Summer excused. Stephen Bond Smith, University of Hawaii Youth Hero. Excused. Don Chang. Yes, present. Don. Thank you. And Chris Liu, Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation Commission.
Present.
Thank you. Jackie Hoover, Hawaii County Economic Development Board.
Jackie Hoover, Hawaii Island Economic Development Board.
Oh, terrific. Thank you, Jackie. Jackie Kaina.
Good morning, everybody. Jackie Kaina, Kauai Economic Development Board.
Thank you, Jackie. I know you're feeling poorly. If you need to take a break, please do. Thank you for being present. Leslie Wilkins.
Present, Valley Economic Development Board.
Kat Awakuni.
I'm here, Kat Awakuni Cologne from Oahu Economic Development Board. I'm alone in the room.
Thank you, Kat. Jeff Darrow and Michelle On from County of Hawaii Planning Department.
Aloha, Jeff Darrow with the Planning Department. The Big Island.
Thank you, Jeff.
Aloha.
And Michelle, is she on as well?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning. Michelle On with the Hawaii County Planning Department.
Thank you so much. Marie Williams, County of Kauai Planning Department.
Present, and no one else from Kauai County Planning Department is on this call. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Kate Lystone.
Present.
Aha. What was that?
Sorry, I snuck in. Had to make a vote and then I got here.
Thank you very much. Sorry, it worked so well. Okay, and Dina Wong from the County of
Hi.
County, Honolulu.
Good morning, Dina Wong, Department of Planning and Permitting. I'm here by myself.
Thank you, Dina. I love your background. That is gorgeous. Okay. And then do we have any guests or members of the public? Let's start over there with Matt.
Matt Frelberg, Honolulu Collective.
Great. Next.
Josh Wish, also Honolulu Collective.
Hi, aloha, Becca. I'm here for Representative Pucciano.
Thank you, Becca. And then our staff. Go ahead, let's start with Lauren.
Hi, Lauren Premiano, Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. And Claire McCreary, Office of Planning and Sustainable Development.
And over there in the tech table.
Isabel Scholes, also Office of Planning.
David Kobayashi, Office of Planning and Sustainable Development.
Terrific. And are there any, let's see, we have a member of the public, no members of the public. Anybody else who has not introduced themselves? Priya, do you want to
sure.
introduce yourself?
Aloha, I'm Priyam Das, Department of Urban and Regional Planning, University of Hawaii, and it's just me.
Thank you, Priyam. All right. Anyone else? No, okay. So we have an action item on our agenda, and that's approval of the meeting minutes from the May 29th meeting. Members, do you have any corrections, edits, or comments to the minutes as distributed? If there are no comments, I move to approve the minutes of May 29, 2025. Second. Woo. All right, it's been moved and seconded. We won't take a roll call vote for this, but and if I don't hear any objections, the minutes have been approved as circulated. No objections, okay. Now we'll move on to the most important part of this meeting, and that's presentation of the work plan. So we're going to have a presentation, but it's gonna be interactive. You guys can't go to sleep because we're gonna ask for input. As your role as task force members, you know, is designed to gather. Okay, so go ahead with that. Lauren, are you gonna start?
Yes, I will. Okay, well, while we're getting that set up, thank you everybody for being here. As Mariella said, we, wanted to change it up from the last meeting and, flip the script, put the discussion on you folks. So we'll kind of be talking through some slides, pausing for discussion, coming back to the slides. It'll be sort of hopefully more conversational and engaging in that sense. But also, if you haven't already gone to the bathroom, or if you need to, I think as long as we don't break quorum, step out on your own because we're not going to pause this time. We've got a lot to get through. So
They,
I don't want to miss anything good.
so, orange is ladies and blue is gentlemen.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll be walking, and it's okay for me to proceed, right? We still got, okay. We'll be walking through our work plan with you today for the task force's consideration. And because we'll be asking for feedback and we'll also welcome email comments from the task force members after this meeting. We won't be asking for approval this meeting, but we'll ask for it in the next one. So, sorry, Claire, are you advancing or? Oh, yes. Who's advancing? Okay. Okay. Here we go. Okay. So it's been a few months since our first meeting, so we thought we'd start with a quick refresher on what's guiding this effort. Act 36 is our enabling legislation. It establishes this task force and also charges the task force with recommending updates to Chapter 226. Chapter 226, of course, is our Hawaii State Planning Act. We also refer to it interchangeably as the Hawaii State Plan. And this is broken out into 3 separate parts. Part 1 lays out a long-term vision for Hawaii's development through goals, objectives, and policies. Part 2 describes a planning, coordination, and implementation system to help achieve that vision. And part 3 focuses on priority issues and policy considerations of statewide concern. And while these are 3 distinct parts, they're intended to be working together and form a single unified framework. We refer to this effort as phase 2 because it builds on an earlier phase 1 report that was done in 2018, and that laid the groundwork for some initial recommendations for this update process. Okay, that's it. Under Act 36, the task force's first charge is to develop a 2-year plan, which we are referring to as a work plan. And this is going to outline the steps for the update process. The work plan is organized around 4 key tasks. Task 1 examines the relevancy of Chapter 226 to the current and future needs and values of Hawaii's people. Task 2 assesses the effectiveness and coordination of the existing statewide planning system. Task 3 designs and implements an equitable process to inform the recommended updates. And Task 4 develops metrics and benchmarks to measure progress toward the revised goals and objectives. And so together, these tasks will culminate in a final report of recommendations, including draft legislation to update the State Planning Act prior to the start of the 2027 session. The work plan that we'll be presenting draws inspiration from three sources. One is that phase one report, which was largely driven by a state agency impact survey. Second is insights from stakeholder interviews that our team conducted over the last few months with our county planning department colleagues. And then thirdly is looking at the historical processes that shaped the update and initial establishment of the State Planning Act in the 70s and 80s. So we'll walk through each task, we'll connect it back to the Act 36 requirements. We'll outline some of the key questions that we think are necessary to answer through those tasks. We'll talk about some of the proposed activities and sub-projects. And we will highlight insights, relate that to the findings of the phase one report and the stakeholder interviews. And again, we'll close out each task section with some discussion prompts to get your strategic guidance and wisdom. Any questions before we get started? Okay. Was that enough? Did I buy you enough time?
Cleaning the bathroom. So then I was like, so I just stood there until someone noticed me. So everything's fine now.
Okay, perfect time.
And I've got food and that's even better.
Good.
Thank you.
So the first task again focuses on developing recommendations that reflect the current and future needs and values of Hawaii's people. Act 36 specifically charges the task force to review part one of chapter 226 for its continued relevancy and to recommend updates to modernize and improve it and align it, importantly, with state, county, and public interests. It also asks us for opportunities to simplify chapter 226 so that it's easier ultimately to interpret and use. And while Act 36 doesn't explicitly name Part 3, which are the priority guidelines, we've included it in Task 1 just because we think that it's interchangeable with Part 1. So we really should be looking at them in conjunction and considering updates kind of collectively across those parts. Okay, so we'll break it down now into kind of the individual sections here. This is hopefully familiar principles and values and to inform the updates to the principles and values, but we'll need to assess how the current ones still hold true among Hawaii's current and future residents. We'll draw on existing studies. One of the things that we, I think, ourselves experienced and heard a lot through the phase one report and the county planning departments is engagement fatigue. So we want to be respectful of that and want to draw on the existing studies while also checking for missing and underrepresented voices from those studies. And so to fill those gaps with the underrepresented communities, we plan to do targeted community workshops and focus groups, particularly with community-based organizations that serve those underrepresented voices. In looking at the state goals, we want to see how well they align with the principles and values, once that's sort of checked against, but also as well as state and county policies. This will involve primarily legislative and policy research to review existing goals that are written into statute, as well as the goals that are expressed in state and county plans, just to see how well they align with and are reflected in the current state goals. Stakeholder interviews and community workshops, again, will help to add some color and inform our review of the state goals as well. So the objectives and policies are a little more complex, as you can see by the small font. They're currently organized around the 5 topical areas at the top of that table on the left: population, economy, physical environment, facility systems, and sociocultural advancement. And those collectively represent 25 subtopics, each of which have a small amount to a very large amount of objectives and policies. So the key question, that we think we need to answer here, the questions are, do these objectives and policies still lead us toward the desired future? What's missing or outdated? And is this even still the right structure and framing for guiding statewide planning moving forward? And to this last point, Act 36 again calls for us to consider simplifying. But the phase 1 report echoed the sentiment and kind of further called out that the objectives and policies should actually be pared back and should focus on coordination between state and county agencies rather than kind of focusing on specific policies. So in addition to getting the task force's perspectives to inform how we consider making changes to the objectives and policies, which will prompt you folks on, we'll also gather input on this through stakeholder interviews, particularly with those agencies that are directly implicated by Chapter 226. And then we'd also like to look at how other states organize their statewide plans, just for some ideas and best practices. Current priority guidelines, which again is part 3 of Chapter 226, focuses on key statewide issues and policy considerations. And these were a later addition to Chapter 226 intended to address a broader statewide interrelated priorities rather than the specific functional areas that we saw for the objectives and policies of the prior slide. But still intended to guide the statewide planning implementation system, including the state functional plans and county general plans. So as we look at these guidelines for relevancy, the questions that we're wanting to ask, again, are do they still reflect the statewide's current priorities? And is this the right structure, especially as we ask that question about part 1? And how can we improve the overall usability again of Chapter 226? So in addition to reviewing part 3 in relation to part 1, we'll also similarly draw insights from stakeholder interviews, community workshops, and examples from other statewide plans. This is maybe a fraction of the definitions currently in chapters 226. And so as we move through the review process, we will be working closely with stakeholders to identify and define terms that need identifying, just so that the concepts and intent are hopefully captured and clear, as well as consistent. In addition to that, once we've compiled the recommended updates to the other parts of Chapter 226, we'll do a more thorough review of the full list of current definitions and, ask ourselves these wonderful questions: what's missing, what's irrelevant, what's outdated, what's unclear, and what has newly emerged through the update process. A lot of activities around this task 1. It's a very robust task. Some of these sub-projects, as we refer to them, are already underway. Stakeholder interviews will be our primary input for task 1. It's also going to help identify new and emerging issues, as well as consider the relevancy of the current issues in Chapter 226. We will further explore these identified issue areas through issue data studies. These studies will provide the data and analysis needed to guide recommended updates to parts 1 and 3. And then, additionally, it's possible that they could serve as a resource for county general plans and functional plan updates. We'll hold community workshops, as we discussed, to engage community-based organizations focusing on underrepresented and missing voices. We'll also conduct legislative research, and all of these inputs, we're proposing the use of permitted interaction groups to focus on specific issue areas and review all of the data collected above to generate recommendations for updating the State Planning Act. And then finally, we think that the legislature plays a critical role in helping to ensure that there's open dialogue and opportunity for public participation through legislative and traditional briefings. Okay, we made it to our first discussion topic, which is what new or emerging issues are missing from the current structure of chapter 226. We're showing on the left the current structure of part 1, and on the right the current high level priority guidelines in part 3. So we're hoping to get just kind of some initial spitballing ideas of, when you look at this, what's missing, what's kind of glaringly left off the table here. So this is hopefully a softball question, but we'll open it up for discussion. What's missing?
If nobody says anything, I'm gonna start calling on people. Hey.
You're gonna always count on me
Yeah.
to say something.
Good.
Sorry, so I'm also trying to reread these as, before I make a comment. So
Yes.
just know that I haven't reread them and I'm making a comment anyway.
Go for it.
I feel like climate adaptation is missing as a specific topic. We talk a lot about, 3 of us at least on ours, 4. I don't know how many of us. Same committees all the time. But we talk about this in the climate mitigation and adaptation, and one of the county's observations is that we have spent a lot of time on mitigation. And honestly, we have to start spending time on adaptation. And so I feel like that is a place for this to be. Or maybe I'm missing it. Oh, sorry. It was over there. Okay, got it. I was looking in the boxes.
It got added way after the original draft of 226 was adopted by the legislature. So it was one of the more recent changes.
Got it.
But as we talk about looking at how to integrate part 1 and part 3, that would mean that it would get promoted from part 3 into a new part 1 as co-equal with other issues, I think.
Great. Yeah, I support that. That's what I meant to say.
What is the difference here between part 1 and part 3? Like,
Great question.
I would guess, and I'm not an expert on this, that part 1 was the initial work done in the 70s by a very extensive process and adopted by the legislature. Part 3 were topics that arose after the original adoption. They got, rather than integrated, got added. And so they labeled it slightly differently, priority guidelines as opposed to goals, objectives, and so.
so in the new one, those 2 things will be combined as a set of new
That has yet to be.
objective policies and
Yet
guidelines.
to be confirmed,
Okay.
but it is definitely something on the table.
So I will open with it. I have not read in detail all these, but just looking in part 1, the economic things that are called out are very reflective of the economic drivers of the 70s. That agriculture, I'm assuming large scale, and the visitor industry. So if we're calling out in subsections different sectors of the economy, I would urge us to look at the sets and see the sectors of the economy that have been identified by all the different communities and add those or add that or wherever the appropriate integration place would be. Under facility systems, I think telecommunications is kind of an outdated term, and we should update that with the, the need for bandwidth and connectivity in that and make it a little broader than what it used to be called. Again, very 70s definitions, and yes, I was alive then, unlike someone doing.
I was not.
So I was
Just barely, just barely not.
I was. So I was a kid, a very young kid,
Yes.
but anyway, so those are just some of my and again, I think that I don't know, leisure to me under socioculture just seems a little, maybe it's because we don't have much leisure time anymore, but I mean, it just seems very fluffy rather than maybe health and wellness or something that's more encompassing of, you know, that time that you would have for that, or family engagement or something that just seems kind of fluffy with those other topics. I think we could bring in. So those are just on first blush. I don't know what the content of each of those little subsections says, but just on their categorical face.
Great. Before we go to the guys online, Chris, do you want to add anything?
Sure.
Good.
I kind of like the idea to pare down the objectives and policies that the consultant put. I mean, if you think about it, like having kind of an umbrella that then filters down, like water is probably one of the main objectives and policies that we should be looking at, because it filters into agriculture, it filters into housing, it filters into everything. So if to their point of connecting the work that the agencies do, like how does everything get back to our water management? Who's involved? You know, are improvements needed? I think that, like, what are our main needs? And then go from there. And then we can fill in what's missing, because we already have this great list, but now we get to pare it down.
Yeah.
So I don't know, that would be my suggestion, based on, again, having surface level.
Surface water and groundwater?
Oh, yeah, sorry, no pun intended.
And filtered,
Yeah.
by the way.
Filtered.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to.
Sorry, my view on particularly thinking about the economy column, and I like it in the part 3, how it's just economic development. It's not specific as to which part of the economy is developing. And actually, I would suggest the Planning Act itself shouldn't really be specifying which areas we should be going into. That sort of what it needs to be is that it's governing, it's facilitating any potential area that someone comes forward with a proper idea where they want to make a go of it, right? They can see that, and economic development captures that much more than having specific. So I don't think you should necessarily even specify any particular industry. You may want to, if there's something, you know, particularly given tourism is such a large part of our economy, you may want to have some more specific stuff in there about tourism. But in general, it needs to be a framework that any industry can work with for managing resources and planning. So
good comment.
Yes, better said than what I said. Thank you. I agree.
Now I want to turn to our online participants, because shall we just start with, I see hands raised for Jackie and Dina. Let's go ahead and start with Jackie.
Hi, so climate change adaptation, the word adaptation calls to mind that we should be looking at infrastructure and technology adaptation as well. For example, we talk about solid and liquid waste and other infrastructure, and there have been significant technological improvements since we originally had our infrastructure put in, whether we're talking about piping or cabling or whatnot, geothermal as an example, and also the technology adaptation. You know, we're all wrestling right now with AI and the role that it plays in all of the sectors that we're talking about, including, for example, I'm concerned about the role that AI plays on rate establishment in the electrification in the grid sector, in the utility sector. So I think that besides climate change, there are other adaptations that we need to integrate into this.
Thank you, thank you. Dina, followed by Jeff.
Hi. Okay, I didn't really dive deep into all of these objectives and policies on one area I was thinking could be woven in, and maybe it's mentioned in one of these, but would be like policies and objectives for creating a really age-friendly communities and neighborhoods. And then the second one, and maybe it's under transportation, was to have policies on just mobility and creating like multimodal transportation between and within our neighborhoods. And then someone mentioned water, so maybe something touching on One Water and how it's affects the different agencies.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Thanks.
Okay, Jeff, we're gonna unmute you, please.
Can you hear me okay?
We can, but oh, and I like having your camera on too. Thank you.
Only when I speak.
Yeah.
So the I was thinking about, the advancements in renewable energy. I did look at 22618, and it does speak to that area of energy, so that's good. I just wanted to affirm that I completely agree with Kate and looking at climate adaptation and climate change and the impacts, as well as the matter of AI, because that is just coming at us so quickly and so intense that they really need to be, we gotta be focused on the potential impacts of that across the board. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Marie.
Hi.
Great.
Hold on, let me turn on my video. Hi.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, just wanted to mention that the policies and objectives for health could probably be looked at and we could update it. It could be informed perhaps by the healthy, our healthy state plan. It's a little primarily focused on healthcare right now, but I think it would be important to also think about how the way we build our towns and roads and streets impact health as well, and what those health outcomes are. That would be good to update that section. And the other section, oh, and I also agree with what someone previously said, that the leisure section, if you take a look at it, it's pretty good, but leisure might not be the best word. Like we might want to update recreation or something like that. And also just wanted to bring up AI as well and think about perhaps in the government section, it might be appropriate to have a policy of how we should be using AI or should not be using AI. Just something to that effect. And I believe someone brought up an issue with like, should we outrightly address the fact that our aging population is growing, and if perhaps that's something that we call out. And likewise, it would probably be appropriate to have like a youth focus section, even though youth, of course, is woven through a whole bunch of these, but just really thinking about, well, what are our objectives and policies related towards youth and yeah, so just those comments for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Kat Alconi, you haven't got your hand raised, but I do want your thoughts.
I was glad that everybody's talking about AI because that popped to mind first, so won't beat that horse, but want to echo that. I also was really happy that Leslie was calling out the SEDS in particular, because I think that there are a few more areas called out specifically within the SEDS that could be sort of looked to, including the phrasing. So I was happy with what everybody was highlighting previously. Thank you.
Thanks, Kat. Jackie Kaina, you have some thoughts would like to share with us?
Yeah, I'm gonna pretty much echo what Jackie Hoover and Kat mentioned. I think the one thing that kind of stuck out to me, and I can't remember where I saw this, but it has to do with just cyber resilience, digital infrastructure and data governance. And so this is 226. Oh, I'm sorry. It's under the telecommunications section. And basically, because we were involved with the whole digital equity with the state here on Kauai, and that just stuck out to me, especially because we're doing a lot of cyber work, but just that part. So, and I'm sorry, I am just kind of reviewing these things right now.
No apologies needed. None of us have read the entire.
Yeah, so I think that's the one that kind of stuck out to me the most right now, in addition to, what everybody else is sharing.
Great, thank you very much. Dawn Chang.
Thank you. I will share my struggle with this, the topic that we're on right now. I guess it's because I looked at the state goals, and I see those as aspirational. But I'm looking at the test, the discussion, the objectives and policies as being sort of how do we implement. But what in my mind is missing is sort of principles. So overarching principles that should guide all of our decision making. So for example, at DLNR, we face constantly the challenge between, management of public lands, but yet we have competing interests. So when decision makers have to make decisions, what are those guiding principles that we should be looking at? I mean, so for me, some of what I see is, and I don't know how to integrate or incorporate it, but is that we are looking at a greater integration of all of these principles and objectives into that fulfills this overarching, I guess, where do we want to go? Because I just see there are so many challenging issues. The difference between the have and have-nots in Hawaii is getting even bigger.
Yes.
Visitor industry impacts are even greater on disadvantaged communities. Equity is overarching. How are we ensuring that our decisions are being, we are taking into considerations those kinds of cultural concerns. And I guess I'm trying to find out where, because I see the whole issue, one water, sort of overarching, it affects affordable housing, sustainable ag. That a lot of these issues are really overarching, but I am sort of looking for what are those overarching principles that should guide us as we look at, the changing times of climate change. We've got AI, many of the issues that all of you have been raising, I totally agree. But I guess I'm looking that this plan should be reflective of where we are at our point in time in our society, and recognizing that there are competing interests and changing needs that we have to serve, the broad-based community. I don't see homelessness on here, and that to me is one of a major issue that we're all struggling with. So, and I'm sorry, I'm not being as constructive, but I'm struggling with, okay, we're into policies and objectives, but what I find missing in this particular exercise is how do we bridge the goals to these policies and objectives? How are we ensuring that they're guiding principles that reflect the current community's needs challenges and opportunities, but at the same time, we're providing specific objectives on how we're gonna meet that. So again, I apologize. That's my struggle with
That's
this.
a wonderful segue into. And let me just, comment that we need to.
Lauren, hold on.
Okay.
Are there members of the public who'd like to comment on this segment? If nobody else. Just a. Josh, go ahead.
Two things, I'll try to keep it super quick. One is because there were so many comments about AI. And noting that you've got both the information industry and telecom in here. And that one of the things that spurred us to think about all this in the first place was the original act was written before the internet was even. Is maybe just trying to keep in mind some way to not like just, even though AI is gonna be with us a long time, but not just to put in like the most current technology, but to try to put in something to account for the fact that this is going to evolve. So maybe not just naming those individual things. And then one other thought just coming from what Don was saying about those values is, I know also something that was a lot of discussion as this was getting started up was trying to make sure that we're taking a look at the definition sections of the State Planning Act and to make sure that we even have some common definitions of things like a healthy economy, which could then include things like dealing with houselessness and other aspects that could be one of the real uses.
Thank you, John. Stephen Bond Smith, you want to?
I normally think about this with respect to economic development, but the same applies to virtually everything, which is I think your point about principles, that it's really that if you set a certain set of principles, these principles stay in over time. So even if in time, those principles are still valid and the act should be flexible enough to be able to deal with that. What's also required over that is then a layer of sort of monitoring, governance, adaptation. What that is saying, what are we measuring? How are we measuring success? Are we achieving success? If we're not achieving success, are we measuring the wrong thing? Or should we measure something different? Or should we adapt and do something slightly different? So it's this constant monitoring, checking those measures of success, adapting, or even abandoning some things, depending on, and that constant holding the system to account to those principles. It's very well to have put forward principles, but unless you're actually checking on how well you're doing, it's difficult to know. But the same thing can apply whether we're talking about technology, that we have a system that's flexible on different types of technologies that go along, who knows what the next thing is after AI, or economic development, or housing, or health, or anything else.
Thank you, Kate.
Sorry, just adding on to all of that, because I'm totally in agreement. There's a lot of text in this document that gets into this very specific, and we're gonna be updated on it immediately, because as fast as things were going back in the 70s, they've exponentially. I don't even know how to describe the difference between what's happening then and what is happening now. So I think what I'm hearing, and if I'm not, I'm just gonna add it, is this idea of almost a rubric for, or a pathway for when these things come up, how we handle them.
Yeah.
And so, some driverless cars, is a thing that's happening now. How do we handle that as a state? How do we think about that in this context? More than what this was before. And I would hesitate to say this out loud, but we've kind of said it in our one-on-one with Lauren, like, we don't really use this, right? And it's important that we have something, if we're gonna do this, let's have something that we can all use at the end. So.
Okay, Matt, go ahead.
Kind of actually bouncing off of what Kate was saying there, I think there is an importance of making sure that both the county departments, the county councils, the state departments, and the state ledge are all buying in to whatever is being discussed and what policies or priorities are being placed in here. And to do that, maybe it is kind of going back to the idea of more principles than identifying what specific categories should be placed in here. I think someone mentioned before, the idea of water is going to apply to issues for housing, for agriculture. Then in here you see water relating to agriculture, land, air, and water quality. There's just water. Solid and liquid waste is going to involve water too. So just a general thought, when the task force is thinking about what policies and priorities, rather than trying to really specify and narrow down what they should be, maybe try to take it more in a broad sense, and so you can have less categories that cover multiple things, that thus make it easier for each of the agencies and elected officials to follow.
Thank you, thank you. Any other thoughts before we move on? Anybody else online, that would like to add a comment, even if you had a comment before? No, I don't see any hands raised. Okay, do you want to take a break now, or do you want to go through the next?
You wanted us to go straight through.
Oh,
Like a 1 hour.
Well, and here's why, because we ambitiously had 8 discussion topics. And that's basically not gonna. No, I mean, and this is a wonderful conversation because it actually alludes to, all of the things that we had wanted to raise for discussion with the task force. I think we just mistakenly thought we could accomplish all of it today. This was honestly just meant to kind of get our.
You gotta
minds
do something.
moving
You
at
gotta-
10 in the morning. But maybe, we'll try to speed through the actual content, but if it's okay, just to kind of keep going here, and picking up on Chair Chang's comment on kind of a framework. I think the question, or the way that we were starting to kind of think about that question is, aside from the issues, how do we actually want to frame and think about the things that matter, right? And so the table on the left describes the current framing that we have. And then, just for discussion purposes only, we've put a table on the right there, just as an alternative framing. It's not a proposal, it's just to get some reactions. But with the emerging issues that we were just kind of talking about, how well do we see them fitting into the current framing for us? I think we sort of answered that question, not very well. And so I think the guidance that we're seeking from the task force here is, to what extent should we consider reframing the way that we think about objectives and policies? And I guess, what should inform that?
Can I start?
Yes.
Okay, let me, so, I like where you're heading in the alternative framing. Because I think, when I put myself in the shoes of a member of the public, or even a decision maker, I think a lot of times, what I'm hearing and what I faced over at DLNR, both at CWRM and the Land Board, is there's a lack of integration between government agencies and private sector. That if there are these, how are we ensuring that, whatever the tool or the way that we describe it, it is something, again, these broad principles that we all aspire to, but it does permit greater integration of all of the different departments or state agencies or government agencies to work more efficiently and effectively. We have limited resources. We can no longer just look at the land that we have control. How does fire mitigation cross over all of these and how? So I guess those are the kinds of, I guess, my thoughts about however we frame it. It should be reflective of the government taking a concerted effort to ensure that we are all integrating and coordinating. Because I think that is a very strong message that we want to provide to the public, that we are working together. We're not working in isolation. Because I guess the previous slide, it was more like, how are we all implementing this? But maybe if there's some way of, as we frame these issues, it also incorporates this integration of resources, decisions, and agencies participating in a collective movement towards accomplishing that. If that makes sense.
You're really planting the seeds so well.
So I just want stuff like that.
Okay, unless there are any burning comments, let's move on. Okay.
So with the alternative framing, I worry that some of these are too specific, and it's actually doing the opposite of what we were talking about before, about having sort of broad principles. The dimensions on the left seem to be, they're not principles as such, just these are the different dimensions we need to look at for thinking about all sorts of different planning decisions, and it's divided into, reasonable segments. Whereas on the right, if you're talking about building a road, I'm not sure which part of that is necessarily going to fit into. It's going to fit into multiple things. But when you're talking about building a road, on the left, it's also going to fit into multiple things, but it gives you the lens with which to look at each one. So with the right, we can look at those things, but there's going to be things that are missing, I think, when you go that specific. It's actually less things, I think, that are missing with that sort of current framing. The one big red flag that I had this morning about managing growth and population control is because it's generally been a thing in urban planning globally to sort of limit the growth of the city and make sure we're not having urban sprawl and so on. Except what that does is reduces population growth and reduces how large a city can get, but then it reduces supply and makes the house more expensive. The story of California or Hawaii, in that they haven't been building enough to facilitate population growth. So really, rather than trying to manage population growth, whatever, it's really just the planning system should be about facilitating the activity rather than restricting it.
Thank you, that's noted. Anyone online have any responses to this, just the topic of reframing, since we're not proposing the alternative ones at this point, we're just putting them out there to stimulate discussion. You see any hands raised? No, okay, let's go ahead and move on then.
Okay, so Chair Chang again kind of pointed to this, but task 2 focuses on developing recommendations to strengthen the effectiveness and coordination through the statewide planning system, which is effectively charging us to look at part 2. So as a quick reminder, part 2 covers how the state plan is actually implemented. It's focused on state functional plans, county general plans, and state programs. And again, these are all intended to work together in harmony with one another, but also in implementing parts 1 and 3. So this is what we mean by it's intended to be a cohesive framework. So for this particular task, we really need to take a step back and ask how well the system is or isn't working today. And whether it is fulfilling its intended purpose, and importantly, understanding why or why not. Some of the comments about the complexity of it, and then also maybe kind of overemphasizing specific policies over and more of this, the importance of the coordination come to mind here. So let me just keep. Yeah. Okay, tying it back to the phase 1 report recommendations, these sentiments are echoed. It also calls attention, to the possibility of technology playing a role in helping support agencies to fully participate in the planning system. And then, we had really great feedback on this from the county planning departments. Also echoing challenges and kind of getting a little bit more detailed on what some of those challenges look like in terms of county and state coordination, but also the prevailing issue being resource constraints between persistent underfunding and understaffing, an increasing workload, additional bureaucratic complexities that get added on every year, really make it difficult for county agencies and certainly state agencies as well to fully participate in this. So, the questions that we want to ask on this front are, how do we balance the intent of a statewide planning system with the realities of, you know, those who are expected to participate in it. And then, you know, is there a role in the State Planning Act or through this task force discussion to consider how how capacities can be and should be enabled to support those participating in it. Sub-projects kind of follow a similar thread to task one, the stakeholder interviews, so the same stakeholders and the interviews that we're conducting in association with task one. We've got a section of the discussion guide that focuses specifically on this issue and understanding what are their challenges to fully participating in the statewide planning system and coordinating with agencies. We'd like to propose an issue data study specifically on this topic that kind of takes that input from the stakeholder interviews and more aggressively investigates what some of those limitations and challenges are. And then again, feeding that into a permitted interaction group specifically to review and tackle and make recommendations around how to make the statewide system more effective in achieving ultimately, you know, all of the outcomes that we outlined in parts 1 and 3. Okay, so now on our third discussion topic here, you know, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the role and relationship between state and county planning, and specifically, you know, which policy areas may benefit from a unified statewide approach and which are better left addressed at the county level. So yeah, I guess, you know, open it up for discussion. Any thoughts on?
I think I'd like to hear from the county planning departments first on this. So let's go ahead and start with Kate, because she works.
Sure. Let me get my brain together. So I would say the obvious ones to me are things like housing and transportation. Those are places where statewide framing makes sense. When it comes to growth management, I believe that the counties are better suited to decide where growth should go. And to the extent possible, the state should not play a role in that at all. But that said, in other places I've studied and worked, the state does play a role in growth management in establishing the rules by which you think about growth and how we decide to expand urban growth boundaries. And, you know, like the population, to Stephen's point, the population growth driving that, understanding the population system and how we're growing over time, whether it's through natural increase or, you know, folks moving here, and taking those numbers and going, okay, community, you decide how to do this. Don't do that at the state level, but give us the backing to do it at the local level. So those are my initial comments. I think the place where, sorry, just one last thing is like anytime there's this is weird, right? Because we're connected by water, not by roads, but like anytime there's this kind of cross jurisdictional engagement, and we've said this before, that's where the state should play a role. Let the local jurisdictions make choices on their growth and how they manage their growth, but give them the backing to make good decisions based on kind of principles rather than directives. Yeah. Okay, I'll stop talking. Thank you.
Jeff or Dina, are you ready to go next? And Marie? Well, let's see who I can call on.
I can go, Mary Alice. This is Dina.
Great.
I think on the local level, I mean, I heard that housing should be addressed at the statewide level, but I think, you know, there's been legislation recently about trying to take away like the county's ability to mandate affordable housing. And I think that should be left to the counties. You know, we have our local ordinances that require certain percent of housing, or through our zoning, we have our unilateral agreements which require the housing. And also I think at the local level, the planning for zoning, like the densities and the I know the ADUs and the Ohana units, like those kind of things, like what can be allowed should be for the counties to decide on.
Thank you.
Okay.
Marie, are you ready to go there? Marie Williams.
I can speak if you need me to,
Go
Mariana.
ahead, Jeff, go ahead.
So Kate kind of touched upon this. One of the things that we struggle with in the county, planning departments has been, our ability to effectively zone areas and to do it in a manner that we can effectuate our general plans. There's this dual zoning that we deal with, and the limitations and the restrictions and the processing of trying to make it consistent can be overwhelming and really limit our ability to make effective changes in sweeping zoning legislation. It would, there's been attempts to try to increase the jurisdictional lines, and it seems like it has very difficult time passing. But if that even passed, even to increase the jurisdiction for the counties and the state land use districts, it would give us greater ability to again effectuate our plans, and in turn can help us with housing issues and affordable housing issues and other kind of things. So I struggle with that part. We're trying to, there's even last year there was legislation to try to see how we can be able to do large state land use boundary amendments in a more effective manner, kind of streamlining the process, but very difficult getting it passed. That's the area that I struggle with mostly, that I'd like to see. As far as the areas that benefit, definitely the improvements to the highway system, to the roads, to the transit-oriented developments, the TODs around the island. That's been a huge benefit. It would be good getting better coordination between state and county agencies, and when it comes to these overlapping areas, whether it be roads, whether it be housing, or whether it be zoning. Just so that we're working together in collaboration and becoming more effective to be able to resolve these issues that we have. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Marie Williams? It's just down at the bottom. No, yeah, there we go. Marie, are you still with us?
Oh, hi. Sorry, I had to let me turn on my video. I'm so sorry, I had to step out briefly. Is there a question you had?
Yes, we're gathering input on how the counties think that, the county planning departments think that policy areas could benefit most in a statewide frame And which areas are better with a statewide frame and which are better addressed locally? So by the counties.
Oh, oh man. I think in terms of the framework, because it's such a high level framework, it's in some ways all the topics, at least the ones that we've discussed so far, it does seem appropriate to address it at the level of the entire state. But of course, how we move forward and plan to achieve the goals, that typically, I think for almost all the areas will require work done at the state level and the county level as well. It's not really one or the other. Yeah, I mean, I can't really think of a topic that only the counties would need to be involved in. Yeah, sorry, I might need to think more about that.
Okay, we're actually focusing on part 2 of this, of chapter 226, which is the statewide planning system, which starts with chapter 226 and then goes to county general plans, community development plans, and then zoning. As you think about, the county's role versus the state's role for the land use planning, do you have any areas you think are better addressed at the county level?
Oh, yeah, sorry, one obvious one comes to mind, and I know it's kind of been debated and explored. It does, and it does seem that the SLUD, the district, when we try to amend what those district boundaries are, that, I mean, to me, that seems like a very suitable task for the counties to take on. Yeah, that's just a big one that comes to mind in terms of work that this framework guides, that, and that's more of a process thing too. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. For everybody else's, SLUD stands for State Land Use District. Okay. Thank you, counties. Let's go to other members. Go ahead,
I
Leslie.
just have a question for Kate, because I have such respect for her, for my community. Why would you include housing?
Thank you for that
For a
opportunity.
statewide framework should be provided, because as you know, housing is the greatest crisis across the state, but Maui has the crisis of all crises, so in housing, and since it is the biggest mechanism for population control and growth management, which you clearly define as a county framework. I don't understand.
Totally reasonable, and I appreciate you saying that out loud. So, because I realized as soon as someone else started talking, I was like, oh, I've been misunderstood. All right, that's okay. So, some of the recent efforts that the state has taken to force increasing of densities and stuff like that, I'm not personally opposed to, but at the same time, I do feel like it's an ad hoc approach. And I think that the state does need to take a broader role, a greater role in saying, what statewide do we need housing? So I'm thinking higher level, not a punitive or not a directive role, but thinking about how the state can play a role in providing the housing we need and working together with the counties to achieve that. So we set where the growth will go, but then the state comes in and they offer programs to provide actual physical housing. So that's where my head was at, and keep in mind, I was the first one to speak, but that's where my head was at when I was saying housing. Not that I want a directive approach to housing from the state, but more that I want a supportive role.
Okay, so you don't.
Oh, wait. Oh, rather than take this as a side, conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's go to Stephen.
Building off what Kate and Marie were saying, I sort of agree that in every area, I think there is a role for the state and a role for the county, and defining what that role is depends on what the content is. And I think when it's very specific, not when you're talking about very specific local knowledge, the county's going to be much more of a better place to be able to make those sort of decisions. Whereas with that sort of overarching framework, what are the entire things that affect the state should be making those decisions. But I don't think there's any policy area where you won't have a role for both. To give you an example, I think on the housing thing, one change they made recently in New Zealand is they mandated that councils had to plan for 30 years worth of growth. Part of the problem in the past is they'd only planned for 3 years, and what would happen is people would quite conservatively plan for the amount of population growth that they expected. They would provide for that amount, and then they would hit their target exactly. And go, oh, we got it correct. But it's because they only built enough housing for that many people.
Yeah.
So of course there are only that many people there. And if we're constantly doing that, well, we're always going to get our population forecasts correct, but only because we're planning for just that. So the idea of planning for 30 years is to say, we're going to plan for 30 years, and if it ends up overshooting our target, it actually can, and then we can adjust our targets as we go, right? So you have this 3, 10, and 30-year plan, different stages that happen at each stage. It's not saying that all of that 30 years worth of growth has to happen, but it's saying let's allow 30 years worth of growth. Where is that going to go? Some of it's going to be infill housing, some of it's going to be spreading out further, but we're going to make sure that we've planned for all of that. And as it grows, we see where the needs are and then invest in the infrastructure and so on, right? So the state or the national government, New Zealand, specifies you need to plan for 30 years worth of growth. And then each of the councils go and say, this is where we're going to put 30 years worth of population growth in different parts of our city and how we're going to provide transportation for them. But that's very specific local knowledge that's required to make those decisions. That overarching framework goal of saying 30 years worth of growth is set by the
Well, you'll be delighted to hear, Stephen, that the counties have been doing that. They've already done it. Because they've all designated areas for either directed growth or future urban growth in their general plans and development.
That are often consistent with states.
Yes, understood.
So they're.
No, I'm not saying specific 30, I'm saying that's just an example of one rule. There are many more rules that the state might decide that they need a certain amount of
So we
centralized
heard
funds
from
on
this side of the table, let's, Chris.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of agree with everything that's been said. I guess when I say this nicely, sometimes when state policies go out, you can sense that it was written by someone who works downtown in Honolulu and has not been to the other areas of the state. And so I agree, like the state should be providing coordination for the counties, support, and whether that's financial support, identifying funding streams, like just being that supporter is usually the most helpful because they do have the local knowledge to implement. And they're all a lot of times tasked with implementing these state policies. So if you can make it clearer, objective for them, it helps. And I don't want to speak for the counties, but that's the sense that I get.
Okay, let's go to, you want to hold me? I want to hold. I'm gonna hold you. So Ken Takasako, I haven't heard from you for a while. Do you have, with your background in both agriculture and education, do you have any thoughts on roles that counties versus state should take in this plan?
Thanks for throwing me in on that. Actually, I thought it was pretty easy for education. For me, from an education standpoint, I think it is something that benefits from more of a statewide framing. I didn't, so I thought for this question, I was gonna just cruise on that one. But it's interesting hearing both the county's take on this, and especially with housing and how it's going about. And I don't have a good answer for any of that. I'm glad we're having the conversation. It's very interesting to hear. But I'm glad I don't have to figure out this particular conversation. From education though, I do think should be from a statewide framing.
How about agriculture? I'm aware of your background with agriculture.
The funny thing is I've stepped away from agriculture a little bit, so I would hate to be claiming any sort of expertise in agriculture now. It is one of the reasons I was hoping we could get someone from agriculture on the discussion who is in the weeds with it now. But yeah, it is tough. I mean, I think just seeing how the development of or the marketing side of agriculture has been moved out of the Department of Agriculture and into DBED instead is kind of showing how maybe agriculture as an industry is something that should be driven. And I don't know necessarily if I agree with this, but driven maybe more from an economic standpoint, and the Department of Agriculture is more of a regulatory body now, it seems. But looking at it from whether it should be done at a statewide or a county level, I think it's some of the same issues that are even around housing. I think the counties probably are aware at a more granular level of where agriculture would work best in their different counties, and having coordination at a state level to help provide for maybe funding or how best to provide some of that supports as well. I think I don't have a good answer, but I do know and my brain is now just jumping all over the place because now I'm thinking water is also one of those biggest issues that is really important in agriculture, and is also very much something that the counties would have a better understanding of, and isn't something I think should be necessarily driven at a state level beyond being a 10,000-foot view that water should be a resource that needs to be protected, but allowing the counties to then figure out how best to implement that in their respective areas. But yeah, so I no answers.
So, Jackie Hoover, we haven't heard from you for a while. Any thoughts on this coordination between state roles and county roles?
So as I was listening to everyone speak, including most recently Ken's comments, I keep going back to wanting the state to provide us with the environment and culture in which the counties and subset to the counties, the respective communities can do the work that's necessary. Someone said earlier that it seems that a lot of this was written by somebody sitting in a high rise in Honolulu. And certainly I see oftentimes our planning comes into conflict between the rural areas and the urban policies that have been implemented. So really, if we could provide that environment and make sure that we have better opportunities for collaboration between the counties and the state to leverage and maximize the respective resources that we have, because each of the counties, each of the islands, each of the communities bring different assets to the state planning effort versus I think we tend to focus on the deficits rather than those assets. So I'd like to see us kind of flip this so that the counties have an opportunity to be in more collaboration for overall planning by leveraging and maximizing the respective assets that we bring.
Thank you, Jackie. Let's see, we haven't heard from Jackie Kaina or Kat Awakuni on this topic. Jackie or Kat, comments? Then we'll go to members of the public.
None for me. I'm still trying to read through and process what everybody shared.
Thank you, Jackie. Kat, thoughts?
I don't have anything to add. I really thought that this was very rich. I agreed with a lot of what was suggested thus far.
And thank you, Kat. Okay, members of the public, I think I saw a hand raised over there. Josh.
One just overarching thing to keep in mind, not getting into any particular policy area, is whether it is education, agriculture, housing. I think over the last few decades, we've shown that we've set up systems that are better at providing ways to stop things than ways to provide the resources that we all need. So just as we're taking a look at how the state and the counties better collaborate and interact on these things, try to make sure that we're making sure that we're providing for community input and analysis, but at the right time. And in a way that lets it be considered, but doesn't just create 20 choke points along the way. Because that seems to primarily result in us spending more on everything we need, whether it is housing or access to water, public transportation, and resulting in products that we all end up liking less.
Good point, Matt, or, any other thoughts?
I was actually thinking something similar to Josh, but he said it way more eloquent. That's why these are the bots.
This is why. Okay, Don Chang,
Okay, I am gonna come from a whole different perspective. I am looking at, and this is kind of touching what Josh has said too. Why we have these choke points is because we are doing, in my view, from a state perspective, sort of doing it backwards. If we value resources, water, endangered species, historic properties like burials, if we value those things, then we should be looking at those overarching, where's the right place to build an affordable housing project? Where there's water. So in my view, to the extent that the state can provide those kind of the regional or larger, where are the appropriate places to put water? Where are the water systems? What we're doing is we're driving housing and development by applications. So that's where the choke points come in, because we don't have enough water. That's where community contention comes in, because we're going into communities that are not, this is not appropriate for. So again, for me, kind of goes back to those overarching principles. If we are saying that that there are certain kind of principles that we value, then our policies should be driven by that. And what I'm seeing, so I have great respect for home rule, but I think overarching policies about what are the values that we're trying to protect, that those should help drive some of these local decisions, because right now it is the other way around. And that's why we have we've got controversy, we've got, how would you say, development that may not be there. We're trying to put a lot of housing development in areas where there's no water. We're not taking into consideration impacts of, so again, for me, that's where I think the role of the state is to provide those overarching identification of where are the resources. That may be more, if we value certain reasons, where are those vulnerable resources located, that we make a decision not to develop in those areas. Or we task, so like seaworm, where are the appropriate places for water? What is science telling us? We should be driven by science, not necessarily, and communities, not necessarily by applicants who would like to put development all along the beachfront, which is not appropriate. So I guess that's the perspective that I come from DMNR, as well as sitting on Land Use Commission. There is value for overarching states to drive policies based upon good science, community engagement, and the resources. How that gets implemented, I am very comfortable with letting the counties implement that. But I do believe we're doing planning, and I know we're on, I don't know if they're on YouTube, but ask backwards. And so
7-second delay.
Attribute that one to Kate. Kate said that. Kate said, but that always my comment about balancing counties and this. I think there's a role for both, but what is missing in that is a component of those resource-driven community input ahead of time. That we are, and that's, I do see the value of the state planning process, because it does create the community's participation. But communities aren't going to participate until it starts hitting their area. So that's kind of the viewpoint that I'm coming from, which is a little different, but I think it addresses both Jackie Hoover and Josh was saying, but I think, that is some of the considerations I'd like us to think about.
That sounds like a good segue.
No, it's one,
Yeah.
it really is that wonderful. And you know, it's one thing, I think, right, to provide the overarching, overarching framework in terms of principles and values. It's another thing to, sort of implement against that. And one of the things that we've been hearing a lot in this conversation is the importance of coordination. And so the question, now is, how should the State Planning Act facilitate that coordination piece? What does that tangibly look like in your minds? Open that up for discussion.
I think Jeff should start.
If you're gonna go planning directors, I think Jeff should start this time.
Jeff, you want to take this one? Yeah, unmute yourself, Jeff.
Okay, let's see.
Volunteer.
What should the role be of the statewide planning system?
I think you touched on it already. I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of what this question asks was, talked about in the previous one. But do you see anything else that you might want to add to that, our previous one?
There was so many good things said, especially Dawn. I really appreciated what Dawn said. She kind of brought it to where the rubber meets the road. We've been, especially on our island, we've been really dealing with a lot of issues regarding water. And, there has to be this overall coordination, and that's what this is asking. What should the role be of this in facilitating that coordination? If there was a way that we could really open up doors to break down these barriers and allow there to be some flexibility in making decisions with the state and the counties to be able to move forward, whether it's, the county getting in the way of the state on some projects that the state's trying to do in counties, or whether it's the state getting in the way of the counties in the counties. If there was the ability to be able to work together and be flexible, rather than so rigid and black and white, it really, I think, would benefit all of us to be able to further our goals. And I've been doing this as long as some of you, and I think that's one of the more frustrating things that we find in trying to implement our plans and goals is we run into these barriers. It would be nice if we could figure out ways to, if not break them down, at least make it so we can work through them together. Sorry for so high level.
All
And
right.
I know a lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about, so I'm not gonna.
Okay.
Thank you.
So let's go to Dina and Marie and let Kate bring up the yeah.
Anchor.
Yeah.
Anchor lady.
Oh, let's see. Okay, this question is on facilitating coordination. Okay, on implementation, actually, I was just in some meetings and it was brought up that the counties in implementing like our goals in terms of like where growth should be, we could use more help, our agencies, with state funding for some of the backbone infrastructure.
Okay. All right. Marie Williams, speaking for the county of Kauai.
Yeah, I think in terms of the statewide planning framework and how the counties can better also move forward the intended goals. It seems like a lot of that work, of course, should be in our plans, our general plan. The development plans, which are our community plans and town plans. And I think it might be helpful. I mean, even though the framework is there and we can all easily go and access it and use it to guide our work, maybe there could be some type of more like a document to help guide what our general plans, you know, should include, or how different ways our county planning system can support the state goals as well. I'm just thinking of, I think the California State Planning Act. I'm not saying we should adopt that, but it's very strong, and they definitely require cities and counties to have certain things in their general plans. And but they also like provide support for that. So yeah, because sorry, I'm just thinking that when we did our general plan update several years ago, even though of course everyone at Office of Planning is very easy to work with, I'm not really sure there was any like maybe it was our fault, but we didn't really interface with Office of Planning and development of our countywide plan, and perhaps that should be stronger. Yeah, so that's what my idea is.
Thank you. Thank you. I do appreciate that. You know, we're running out of time. So I think what we'll say is if people have further comments in this area, we're going to give 30 days after this meeting for emails to come to us with ideas for all of the discussion topics, but I would like to move on to the next area.
Can I say just one really?
Yes, you
I
can.
just support everything that Marie just said.
Yep.
That the state should be guiding us as far as what should be in our community plans, and that doesn't happen as well as it should. And then the other thing is just the lead, because I'm never gonna email,
Yes.
the legal backing to say no is the other thing.
Yes.
So
Yes.
just tacking on to what Chair Chang said.
Yeah.
I think it's really important for the state to be able to say, yes, these areas are too important, no can't.
Yeah.
We're not gonna let you build here, because then I can say, state says, no, sorry,
yeah.
guys. I'm at Seawalls are a good example.
No. Okay.
And I'm gonna be like, I'm not gonna.
Because you're not gonna email.
I'm not gonna, so can I just want to
Yes,
be
go ahead, go ahead.
Our planning is, our current state of planning is reactionary, not proactive. We apply when a permit comes in, and then we're like trying to fit it in. So it's reaction, we need to be more proactive. The role of statewide planning, I would love to see, so I wish I had the money, DLNR, where we did regional maps of culturally and ecologically sensitive areas. Stay away from here. We did maps of sea level rise areas, stay away from these areas. We had funds for Seaworm could do monitoring wells to tell you, these are the best resources and locations where we have available water. That's what I would like to see the role of government, state government, to identify where are the appropriate places and where are the places not that's appropriate. So that when you get an application, you can say, yeah, outside, to sea level rise or culturally sensitive areas. But it is the discipline, it is really hard to say no. But we do have to, as decision makers, we have to be disciplined and say no sometimes. It's when we're always trying to be reactionary to an application that gets us into tensions with the community as well as with other agencies. And my final point is, I really think part of the statewide planning is robust community engagement. Is we are trying to identify through community participation, also the identification of some of these resources. whether they're burials, whether they're sensitive community places. But we need to engage people more at the front end than at the back end. So my final comments.
Okay.
Thank you, sorry.
Anybody else
Important question.
has a burning need to?
Just to add that, if it is all clear and transparent as to what the rules are, you're also gonna reduce the workload a lot as well, because it means that a whole lot of applications that would get rejected don't have to go through that decision-making criteria, you can just not submit in the first place, and vice versa. Also, when the ones come in, they meet the criteria, done.
Good point, okay. So I'm gonna turn it back over to Lauren, and we're going to go through.
Claire.
Claire, go ahead, Claire.
Speak loudly, Claire. So good morning, everyone. First we'll be starting with task 3. So this task will be to develop and implement an update process that accounts for existing inequalities and is accessible to historically underrepresented communities. In support of this task, Act 36 highlights the importance of economic and accessibility impacts to low-income communities. And while the main goal here is to consider equity concerns in terms of process for the sub-projects, doing so will ultimately make sure that the task force's decision-making is well informed by community and stakeholder input on equity. And I think I'm just going to jump forward to the sub-projects, but this was one of the things that was highlighted by the phase 1 report, that how to identify stakeholders and communities has evolved over time. And then similarly in the county department planning interviews, they noted community engagement fatigue and that sometimes there were challenges with reaching underrepresented or harder to reach communities. So what we propose to address equity is a combination of stakeholder interviews and community workshops. All stakeholder interviews will address some aspect of equity that is specific to the stakeholder group being interviewed. Equity-related questions that have been asked so far to the county planning departments have included questions like, are there particular groups or communities that you make a point to engage with? And are there groups that you find harder to reach? These interviews will eventually be used to develop a community engagement strategy on how to incorporate identified equity concerns for the remaining update process. And for the community workshops, community organizations such as nonprofits or community-based organizations that serve historically underrepresented and hard to reach communities will be the primary stakeholder group. That leads us into our first discussion question for equity, which is what sorts of community organizations should we be engaging to ensure equitable participation?
I just want one comment. Who's missing at the table is DHHN. That is an underrepresented. It is a community that has not been equitably considered in many of our, they're not here. So, I mean, I would do an extensive outreach to the Department of Land and Homelands and engage with their homestead associations and really get their input in these processes.
You have identified them as a stakeholder or stakeholder interview.
And, you know, and I got scolded in my CWER meeting, I said, no grumble if you don't participate. So, you know, you send them an invitation and I know everybody's got a lot on their plate, but I need you to really impress upon them. And this is the opportunity to ensure that your constituents, your beneficiaries are being considered.
Okay, other thoughts? Kate first, then followed by Stephen.
Super brief, I would start for the community groups, I would start with these nonprofits that kind of collect community groups. So I would say like Maui United Way, they have interaction, you know, for Maui anyway, but also Aloha United Way has similar. And Hawaiʻi Community Foundation, they just know everybody because everyone asks them for money, so they can kind of tell you who's underrepresented.
Good point. Okay, Steve.
Not a specific community group, but a group that is not represented at all is future generations, right? So most of what we're planning for is these people that aren't alive yet. But we need to have a process in place that their well-being is thought out more than necessarily current residents who might want to protect housing values or whatever their current concerns are. And why we was talking about 7 generations, and I think this would be a really good way of incorporating that value. I don't know exactly how to do that, but let's treat future generations as this under or unrepresented groups, to consider what their well-being is.
I think one more thing.
Yes.
You need to talk to litigants, Earth Justice, Sierra Club, because they represent people who don't get, who they don't feel is being represented in the decision-making stuff. So I would reach out to a potential litigants or Native Pine Legal Corporation. There are another one. These are people who represent underrepresented voices. So, we're trying to do a better job of proactively engaging with them, but I would also include them as part of their engagement process.
Anybody, any other comments on this one?
I would add, I know there are sunshine rules of publishing public meetings where they are making it enabled for all to participate, but I honestly feel that those are not the most representative opportunities to really hear from underrepresented communities that don't engage in those. So small group dynamics are the best, as Chair Chang said, going to the homestead community, inviting members of that community, going to their association where it's their neighbors, it's their, where they feel comfortable speaking. And I think that's really, really important. The smaller the group, the smaller size, all the individual interviews you can do, I think are where you'll find the rich, honest, open dialogue. Because there's huge public meeting fatigue.
Yeah. Thank you. Other comments?
We've got Kat and Dina and then one member of the public.
Okay, go ahead. Which one first?
Kat.
Kat, Awakuni, come on.
Hi, I was wondering also about others like the Kova population, recognizing that, they may be, squarely within, sort of this group of underrepresented, but still needing, or still, I guess, needing a lot of resources. And I don't know.
Good point,
I think,
Kat.
yeah, hard to figure out exactly which groups, but there are a number of groups that who we work with who have reach into that kind of community. Also houseless type folks, because they are impacted. We also work with several organizations who interact with those, although I think a lot of the other philanthropic groups would have insight into those communities as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kat. And then Tina, your hands raised.
Yeah, I was just going to add, in addition to community organizations, to use like established networks to reach these communities. So, going through our neighborhood boards, going through even the council members, and they have a, their whole list of their mailing lists, email lists, and things of that sort, just to get the word out when you're holding these workshops and events.
Okay, thank you, Dina.
Okay.
All right, anyone else?
Member of the public. A member of the public.
Okay, Honey, go ahead.
Hi, I'm a board member, Panamia Tonga III, operating engineers, local 3. I would put into that list unions. I feel that they need to be a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Brian Lee, do you have a comment that you'd like to add to this section? No, okay.
Jeff.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. One of the groups that typically, engage public participation. So on our island, that would be one of the groups that we'd be looking at are community organizations to engage in participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Anyone else on this topic?
Just quickly, one other group that I thought
Go ahead.
of, we had, Kama'aina who left Hawaii. So I'm thinking of, we're more native Hawaiians live on the continent now. Yeah, who would like to live in Hawaii, have family here and so on. But at the moment can't because it has been so expensive for their place to facilitate it. For example, but worthy to talk to and get their views as well.
So you might want to talk to, they were formerly CNHA.
Yeah.
Also, but I think they go by now.
Hawaiian Council.
Hawaiian Council. They have an excellent network.
So, so probably just out. Busy. As well. Okay. Guys, we are now just 10 minutes short of 12 noon. I'm suggesting maybe we compress the rest of this a little bit.
We've just got one more task that we can try to talk through real quickly, and then maybe we will sacrifice talking about the stakeholder strategy, and basically that's the next step. So that is more information now. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
That's great. There we go. So our fourth task will be to develop metrics and benchmarks to measure progress. And this should be considered for both the work plan itself and also the content of the state planning act. So I think I will be skipping through those phase one report recommendations, but basically it's just emphasizing that there should be some mechanism to enforce, or not enforce, but just have some way to measure achievements, but it shouldn't be a burdensome activity. And then what we propose is that we start with and measure against our legal mandates. For example, the Hawaiʻi 2050 sustainability report completed in 21 points to various legal mandates for sustainability, such as on greenhouse gas emissions, on locally produced food, and on other mandates related to sustainability. So using Hawaiʻi 2050, other mandates, and benchmarks-based projects as examples, we should be thinking about how we can feasibly measure progress toward the state plan. So what we propose are the following sub-projects, which are stakeholder interviews, issue data studies, and issue recommendation papers. Starting with the stakeholder interviews, one goal of this project is to identify metrics and benchmarks deemed helpful by stakeholder groups. So this will give us an initial idea of metrics and benchmarks to consider further through issue data studies. And following the interviews, one or more issue data studies will be conducted to identify the best practices for metrics and benchmarks, compile the ones currently used in the state, and consider the feasibility of incorporating some of them into the State Planning Act. The studies will use the identification of existing statutory mandates, targets, and benchmarks across all issue areas. And accounting for the findings from the above sub-projects, recommendations will be generated to effectively measure progress on identified issue areas, methods, and infrastructure to aim how we can feasibly measure progress. So I think we're going to be skipping the discussion questions for now, but maybe just like to a couple minutes. If any burning ideas,
You know, I think this might be better after we've got some of those principles, framing, issues. But, members, keep in mind that we will get to this, discussion where we will be looking at metrics and benchmarks, as part of it. Stephen.
Sorry, I just want to add on the next more to the principles thing. The even more important than what the metrics are is how do you respond to the metrics? Do you have some sort of process for responding to the metrics? And that will be part of this discussion directly.
I think that'll be a future discussion. Thank you. Okay. Jackie started.
So, if you wanna, and go for the, well, I saw Jackie had her hand up.
No, let's, you know what, let's set this aside for a future meeting.
Okay, okay. So I think the next one is the seven projects now. So this chart kind of helps to describe how some of the projects will work together to inform each other. So starting.
Louder, clear.
Oh, sure. So starting with stakeholder interviews, this addresses tasks 1 through 4, and these will inform the issue data studies. And these studies will aim to first complete literature reviews that will provide information on existing state planning act issues. And then provide information on new and emerging issues and take a look at the potential framing of these issues. And then study the current functioning and coordination of the state planning system and potentially looking at the functioning of the state planning system over time. This study would be the most relevant to part 2 of chapter 226. And then from here, the community workshops, which are workshops with community organizations, likely in the form of focus groups. It will begin shortly after the issue data studies begin so that the projects can mutually inform each other. And then the main goals of the workshops are to address task 1, which is the task on the relevance to Hawaii's people, and also task 3, which is the task on addressing equity concerns. So all of the findings from these sub-projects will feed into issue paper recommendations. And these are made by the permitted interaction groups. The formation and the number of these groups will primarily be shaped by the findings from issue data studies. And then these recommendations will go to the task force for their approval, and legislative information briefings will allow for the public to react to and provide input on the recommendations during the legislative drafting. And then we have submitted a supplemental budget request for the completion of these projects, but if funding does not come through, we risk not fully satisfying the requirements of F-36. In a situation where funding does not come through in FY27, this flow chart reflects a streamlined process where cuts are made, and then these are just shown in red. For instance, we would not be able to carry out the community workshops as we envision them, which would be something along the lines of paid focus groups with community organizations. And while we could ask them to volunteer their time, we may opt to eliminate this sub-project altogether. Even if we have some funding, we would need to prioritize the completeness of the issue data studies over community workshops for the sake of meeting reasonable conclusion to the project. We would also need to cut back on the number of things. So this is our tentative timeline for the completion of sub-projects. So it shows some of the work that's been started and kicked off this year, like onboarding and desk research, the work plan, stakeholder interviews, the progress report, which will be submitted in December, and then some legislative research. And then it shows some of the projects that will be continued and started in 2026, such as the stakeholder interviews, the issue data studies, the community workshops, the PIGs, and then legislative research, and then the final recommendations. And then in 27, we have legislative drafting, and then the legislative information briefings. And then this is kind of our tentative task force meeting schedule. So the task force will be convening for feedback as the sub-projects progress and for approval as policies being made.
And we could come, sorry, real short. I would urge you to reconsider, if we don't get the funding, to give up the community workshops. I think that's a really critical component. I would prefer that you have less gigs or research studies and you engage the community. That's just my memo.
Thank you. Okay, that was a lot to take in, but members, before I say that, we'll send you an email after this meeting with a request for comments back from you. Some of you may not want to send emails back, but we will be happy to receive whatever we get for 30 days. And that will allow you to reflect on what you've heard and give you some time to digest it and then make suggestions on the work plan. This would not be on the content of the final changes to being recommendations to the legislature, but on the work plan itself. So having said that, does anybody want to offer something this morning? Afternoon.
Mary Alice, just a comment that, all of you are on our stakeholder list. So if we haven't gotten to you yet, we will be working with, DERP, at UH to reach out to the stakeholders. So that would be another opportunity if, you know, an email response is a little bit too challenging. If you folks are available to sit down with us, and offer that in real time, we will be happy to receive those comments.
You want to move to that next slide that's there? Yeah.
So that's how we'll be proceeding. We've already completed, stakeholder interviews with our county planning departments, but, you know, the first of many.
Wait, are you scaring them or?
That's great. Okay, and then this is the closing stuff, over to you, Mary Alice, to close us out.
Okay, so we will, after our 30-day comment period that we're, you know, hopeful that you will, you know, send us stuff. We'll, set another meeting in early December. The timing of that is to allow us to, complete the progress report that is due to the legislature, under Act 36. So we'll, normally, as 20 days prior to the start of the next regular legislative session this year, that because opening day is January 21st, so latest it can possibly be in this cycle of years. That's actually, what's that? That's January 1st or something like that. So we're not gonna go that late. We want to have our progress report finished and submitted to the ledge by,
Well, we're aiming for mid-December, but
mid-December, right. So, watch for a meeting invite from us for early December.
Can I ask, and I know you guys are really busy, but if we could get a copy of the draft report before we meet, so that the meeting is just to talk about any comments that we made. And those of us who may not be able to attend, we can provide you written comments.
Excellent. Good suggestion. Yes, accepted. All right, thank you.
I just have one comment that it is so refreshing to be in a safe place to use the terminology of equitable and care about shared economic prosperity and care about reaching underrepresented populations and underserved populations with people that authentically believe that is the right thing to do and not fear that some dozing element will come down on our heads. So I
Well, that's
really
not to say
appreciate
that's some
that.
dozing.
I know.
I know, but in this room for right now, it's a safe space to use that terminology.
Thank you very much for all your good work too.
Yeah.
Yes,
thank
thank
you.
you.
Adjourned. Yes, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Or November 20th, are we still doing November 20th?
Oh, okay.
That's what,
Yeah.